Another year has passed, another revolution around the sun, and that sun is setting on yet another group of cars. Yes, my friends, it's time once again for the annual regular car reviews Automotive In Memoriam, profiling the cars that won't see the new year. And not all of them are recently introduced models either. We have some absolutely legendary cars that will be going from in production to discontinued. Some more beloved than others, of course, but some that might genuinely surprise you. And to address the elephant in the room, just prior to press time, I discovered that certain cars I thought were being discontinued actually might not be, as it seems the Nissan Altima's demise has yet to be officially confirmed by Nissan and might be pushed back a year, while Porsche is supposedly extending the internal combustion versions of the 718 Boxster and Cayman, which had been previously announced as ending with model year 2025. So I basically had to throw out the script and start over. But then that's kind of fitting for a year in automotive history as manifestly chaotic as this one. Is your favorite among the cars being cast aside? Are some of these cars overdue a trip to the graveyard? Could we see some of these cars again one day in another form? Or are they really gone for good? Everybody grab a rose and have a seat as we say a few words for the dearly departed. I know a lot of people might not be shocked by this, but was the Kia Soul not one of the most ubiquitous cars of its era? There are cars on this list that I'm not sure I've ever seen out in the wild even once, yet the Kia Soul was virtually everywhere the last 15 years, and it outlasted other weird, boxy cubes like the Honda Element, the Scion XB, and the Nissan Cube. Was it good? Well, unfortunately, it's not really about whether the Kia Soul was a good car or not. The question is ultimately, did it make money? Does it make money? And it seems we're pretty far removed from the days where these were front and center of every ad break on Monday Night Raw, with the dancing hamsters and the 2010s music of LMFAO, and their vibes of go ahead and have one more drink, it's not like you have an assignment due tomorrow. Debuting in 2008 and going on sale in America for model year 2010, this was the car intended to reshape Kia's reputation as a blandly efficient automaker into a brand with the aura of a tastefully gaudy tattoo. The body was outlined by former General Motors stylist Mike Torpy, who'd only recently joined Kia's design team when he began working on the Soul in 2005, and the idea for the Soul came from, of all things, a documentary on wild boars that he watched while in Korea to visit Kia's headquarters in where else but Seoul. The idea was to brainstorm a model for a younger demographic, and a New York Times feature on the development of the Soul in 2009 details how Torpy watching a nature documentary led to the creation of one of the most significant cars Kia has ever made. Quote, "The boars fascinated him. He quickly sketched a caricature of one and, for practicality, put a backpack on it. Hanging on a wall in the Korean studio, the sketch drew approval from the local designers, who described the boar as a strong, clever creature. Mr. Torpy said the boar's attitude of strength and capability, it can't be taken advantage of despite its relatively small size, was exactly the image he wanted for a new model aimed at hip, urban youths." End quote. Now, while I'm not sure how we went from a boar in a backpack to dancing gerbils, the Kia Soul would be released to critical fanfare, landing on multiple top 10 lists in 2009. And although sales started kind of slow in those first 2 years, numbers would climb to over 100,000 units annually starting in 2011. Hitting a North American sales peak of around 147,000 units in 2014. and a global sales peak of just over 200,000 units in 2015. The Soul was so successful that Kia introduced the Soul EV in North America in 2015 as Kia's Soul EV, technically, their only all-electric vehicle in the US market at that time. Basically, the Kia Soul was an inescapable part of car culture as the company kept cranking out electric and gasoline models, but sales declined over the years as Kia cut back on engine and transmission options. Gone were the 1.6-liter Gamma or 2-liter new inline fours with multi-port or gasoline direct injection, and gone was the 1.6-liter common rail diesel, and gone were the manual and dual clutch transmissions. No, you get a 2-liter and a CVT. You don't like it? Don't buy it. And the public said bet, and sales collapsed. Yet it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. Did sales of the Soul decline because Kia scaled back on the versatility that made it appealing in the first place? Or did the lack of sales cause Kia to rethink how much effort they wanted to put into this box? Either way, sales took a big hit, although even the roughly 40,000 units it sold in 2025 is better than the 31,000 units they moved in 2009, and you could probably attribute that to the Soul being the most affordable 2025 model year production car, at least according to Car and Driver, at just under $22,000. But it's a different auto industry now than in 2009. And whatever luster the Kia Soul had has been fading like a poorly kept receipt at tax season. And I'm only thinking about this because I think Brian's rubbed off on me with his Ned Flanders-esque dedication to getting his taxes done as early as possible. I mean, I'm practically about to start them now before the year is over. But no, stay with it, Nick. You're doing a good thing. You're doing the responsible thing, the adult thing. Now, the Soul EV predeceased its gasoline-powered forebear when it was discontinued last year. And now, like automotive design in the year of our Lord 2025, Kia loses its soul, bumping the K4 into the entry-level dugout, waiting for its chance to step up to the plate as the company's segment leader. Can it do better than the Soul did? Probably not. But hey, I'm happy to be proven wrong. Rest in peace, Kia Soul. May you dance in eternity with a cabin full of dripped-out hamsters. Okay, so every year I do this. There's always a technicality. A car that's being discontinued, but also not really. And the Jeep Wagoneer is this year's example. Much like the Jeep Cherokee 2 years ago, the Wagoneer is being discontinued to be absorbed into its Grand counterpart. So the base-level Wagoneer nameplate is ending, but the Wagoneer itself seems to technically be continuing on in some form as the Grand Wagoneer, or part of that line. It seems like Stellantis is trying to streamline and simplify everything under the Grand Wagoneer banner. And it's not the worst idea in the world, but it is kind of a wet fart ending for a nameplate that spent 30 years in the ground before being resurrected like college tweets when it returned alongside the Grand Wagoneer in 2021. And while it's not the vehicle on this list that has been in continuous production the longest, it is pretty high up there because the history of the Wagoneer goes all the way back to the 1960s when Jeep was still owned by Kaiser. It was a sort of family utility vehicle with a mix of all-purpose appeal and high-end functionality. Families dug it, yeah, but the Wagoneer commanded the attention of people willing to pay top dollar. Particularly for the Super Wagoneer, with its tilt and power steering and its power brakes. In fact, when AMC purchased the Jeep brand in 1970, dealers supposedly urged for AMC to increase the price point of the Wagoneer, since consumers were showing a willingness to pay higher prices. The Wagoneer would continue through the 70s and into the 1980s as a cornerstone of the Jeep lineup. even as the Cherokee became more of a priority for the brand, and even as Jeep continued manufacturing luxury-targeted variants that overshadowed the base model. The Super Wagoneer would be succeeded in 1978 by the Wagoneer Limited, and then by the Grand Wagoneer in 1984. And by the late 1980s, the base Wagoneer was sliding further down the company's priority pole following the introduction of the Jeep Wrangler, which arrived for 1987, the same year Chrysler acquired the Jeep brand when they purchased AMC for $1.5 billion. Now, I've seen it theorized that rising oil prices did the original Wagoneer in, or that regulatory changes in the 1990s would have made it difficult to keep such an aging platform alive without substantial investment. And I'm inclined to agree, considering that Chrysler had just paid $1.5 billion for an entire company and its assets, and probably didn't feel like spending even more money to save a car that was being spanked by the Ford Explorer. But I would argue there's a case for neglect here, as Chrysler seemed to prioritize the Wrangler, the Cherokee, and later the Grand Cherokee, because that's where their margins were. Not with something like the Wagoneer, which was so far removed from the tastes of its times that it almost seemed like a relic. The Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer were discontinued in 1991 and would remain on the shelf for 30 years before returning in 2021. But despite all the fanfare, the hearts of consumers hadn't grown as fond as you'd think they would after 3 decades' absence. And I think it was a combination of timing and price, since this was brought back before the market had really recovered from the events of 2020. And the price could climb north of $60,000 at entry level for a car that wasn't all that well received, even by the people who did buy it, with consumers complaining about any number of reliability issues, premature wear, and infotainment bugs. Having a bog standard entry-level version of the Wagoneer doesn't really make sense in the current economic climate, since the only people who can really afford a Wagoneer are the kind who are likely to skip over the base model and go right for the fully loaded one, or the stretched-out Grand Wagoneer L. So the Wagoneer is, somewhat understandably, being discontinued for the second time, to live on in the 2026 Grand Wagoneer. It's the death of a nameplate that, at the time of its first discontinuation, belonged to the longest domestically produced vehicle in America, at least according to a 1991 Chicago Tribune article. Its subsequent revival and discontinuation suggests the market just wasn't there anymore for the Wagoneer, that its true heyday was before many of us were ever born, and that bringing it back in the modern era was an anachronistic folly. On the other hand, it's just as easy to argue that this discontinuation is all just a matter of semantics, and that the Wagoneer is as deathless as income tax. I promise, I'm going to get taxes off the brain soon. Rest in peace, Jeep Wagoneer. Axles to axles, rust to rust. The Audi Q8 e-tron is one of the cars on this list that I can honestly say I have never once seen out in the wild. But its death represents a significant blow to Audi's EV legacy, because this was once the brand's flagship electric vehicle. This debuted in 2018 simply as the e-tron, since it wouldn't get the Q8 suffix until 2022, in anticipation of a 2024 model year refresh. And even back in 2018, I'm not sure if the general public was really wondering what an electric Audi would be like, even if they were acknowledging that it was inevitable that Audi would try. Because for one, there was already the short-lived R8 e-tron, which had a limited production run of about 100 models back in 2015, before disappearing faster than a Christmas bonus. But also because when the e-tron actually did arrive, It didn't really read like an Audi, at least from what I've read of what consumers thought at the time. And in some ways, that kind of seemed by design. In reading up on its history for this video, it seemed like the e-tron largely existed to show off Audi's EV potential and build hype for that glorious day when they finally locked in and pivoted towards EVs more seriously. It came across as more of a proof of concept because it doesn't seem like the expectation was to sell a ton of these, you know? Otherwise, Audi wouldn't have continued making it for 7 years. Case in point, its sales peak was in 2023, and even then, they only sold around 8,000 units for the SUV and an additional 2,900 units for the Sportback model, which really doesn't sound like a lot, but then maybe I'm exposing my own ignorance of what constitutes a sales success for a company like Audi. Since even as Audi added subsequent electric vehicles to their lineup like the Q4 e-tron and the e-tron GT, the reality is that the Q8 e-tron and e-tron Sportback remained the best-selling EVs for Audi every single year until 2024. Yet this wasn't enough to save the e-tron. And the death of the e-tron is like a narrative through line for the shifting sands of the EV landscape. You see, when the e-tron launched, it was positioned as a competitor to the Tesla Model X. Yet the problem was that this wasn't Audi's wheelhouse the way it was Tesla's. For example, at launch, e-trons were getting around 204 miles of range, while the Model X could get as high as 295 on the very high end, depending on the trim. The e-tron was also less efficient, both heavier and with slower charge times. And while the e-tron managed to be Audi's top-selling EV, that's sort of like being the handsomest incel in the Discord. And I have a hard time believing the margins justified nearly a decade of production, since I can't imagine it was cheap to make. It's the narrative of the early years of mass EV adoption writ small, as automakers tried to muscle in on the conversation, only to find out they weren't actually ready to be part of this space fully just yet, and scaling back on their pushes into full electrification, and instead doing some EVs here and there, some rededicating their efforts to hybrids, and others going back to the drawing board to figure out how to build a viable path to the future that doesn't end with them being discussed in the same hushed, friendless tones as Stellantis. Now, to their credit, Audi does plan a successor to the Q8 e-tron that one would presume would be an evolution, although that's the sort of assumption pre-programmed into our minds by corporate branding. For all anybody knows, they just release the same car with a different name and better range. But hey, would it really do worse? That's a rhetorical question. Goodbye, Audi Q8 e-tron. May flights of angels sing thee to thy nearest Electrify America charging station. Wait, they use Electrify America, right? A Lexus press release earlier this year announced the official discontinuation of the radical coupe, the Lexus RC, which is kind of a silly name, but then when the Volkswagen ID stands for Intelligent Design Identity Visionary Technologies, it's almost a relief to have a name that doesn't sound like an activation phrase for the Winter Soldier. The RC has been kicking around since the long ago ancient time period of 2014, when it debuted for model year 2015. It's a coupe that was basically the automotive equivalent of a chimera from Greek mythology, except instead of a combination of a lion, a goat, and a snake, the RC was an XE30 Lexus GS in the front, an XE20 Lexus IS in the middle, and an XE30 IS in the rear, with several engine options over its decade of existence, from the 2-liter turbocharged inline-4 from the AR engine family, to the 3.5-liter 2GR V6, and right down to the 5-liter 2UR V8. And while it's a shame to see another V8 coupe tossed by the wayside, I don't know that I'm surprised by it. The RC wasn't exactly a volume seller, peaking in 2015 with just under 15,000 units in the United States, and steadily descending every year since until 2024, when just over 1,800 units were moved in the States. And it's a bit of a head scratcher to me because, on the one hand, they stitched together three different cars like some sort of Frankenstein's monster of luxury coupe reanimation, and then put it on the same Toyota New N platform as the cars it was incorporating into its design, which gives the impression of a lateral move without a whole lot of evolution or nuance. But on the other hand, it was well received critically upon its debut, with journalists noting how fun and engaging it was and how great the engine sounded. You would think this would slot favorably alongside the legacy of Toyota and Lexus cars like the LFA, the SC, even the Supra if you want to really stretch for comparison, but the RC didn't inspire the kind of loyalty those models enjoyed, even if it did last 8 years longer than the LFA did. And maybe that's the real story here. Not that it compared unfavorably to its forebears, but that it continued to survive against the decline of sporty, track-aligned coupes, and against the gradual shift towards hybrids and EVs, and against stiff competition from BMW, and safety regulations making these cars far less cost-efficient due to the generally poor consumer interest and the costs of meeting emissions and safety goals on a model with such a low production volume. This was met with challenges left and right, yet it persevered for far longer than it probably should have, and it gets to go out with a final edition for the RCF that offers carbon fiber exterior trim, BBS wheels, red brake calipers, a new interior with leather and ultra-suede upholstery, and a commemorative engine cover badge. It's a stylish-looking model befitting of a car that, in a very Arthurian way, has probably earned its trip to Avalon. And no, I didn't intend that to be a Toyota pun, but whatever, it works. Now, of course, I have to mention the discontinuation of the RC line's counterpart, the IS line. What the RC was for coupes, the IS was for sedans, to where it was among the last remaining V8-powered sedan options on the road. Interestingly, it lasted even longer than the RC did, debuting in North America in 2000, although it was sold in Japan as the Altezza beginning in 1998, and it became synonymous with the Lexus brand over the years, particularly as it evolved into more of a performance sedan, as the ISF debuted for model year 2008 and kickstarted Lexus's fascination with F-branded performance models. And the breadth and depth of its competition seemed every bit as steep as it would be for the RC, if not more so, as the ISF was going toe-to-toe with cars like the Audi RS4, the BMW M3, and the Mercedes C63 AMG. You wouldn't think that this would survive for nearly 30 years, but for the most part people seemed to genuinely like it once they actually got to drive it. The IS line is in the top 5 longest-running nameplates for the Lexus brand, after the ES, the LS, the LX, and the RX. And so the death of the IS line and the RC along with it represents a changing of the guard when it comes to Lexus's overall identity, as they seem to be pivoting away from naturally aspirated enthusiast cars, even as a niche offering to that demographic, and instead putting more time and energy into SUVs and hybrids and EVs. I can't really blame them considering the performance coupe and really performance anything demographic is shrinking faster than a stiffy in an ice bath, but I can at least appreciate that the RC and IS lines held out for as long as they did, born as they were upon the changing winds of a predictably unpredictable automotive industry. Rest in peace, guys. You are too naturally aspirated for this world. So this is another tricky one, as the Polestar 2 is being discontinued, but mostly just in the United States, and even then you can still get their pre-owned inventory here. But for now, any continuation of the Polestar 2 seems limited to just the hatch, and only then in overseas markets like Europe and the UK, the latter of which is Polestar's best market. Back in January, Polestar's CEO told publication Autocar that the lineup for the foreseeable future will be the Polestar 2 hatch, the large SUV Polestar 3, the large saloon Polestar 4, the four-door performance coupe Polestar 5, the ultra-low-volume sports car Polestar 6, and the mid-sized SUV Polestar 7. It's a decently diverse array of cars, and the company seems confident that they're well positioned to sell. The company's CEO has promised sales increases of 30 to 35% over the next 3 years, which is a wild promise to make, like a New Year's resolution based on nothing other than the optimism of not having to deal with something right this moment. Because nobody has more capability and willpower than the nebulous future versions of ourselves that we imagine. But then, the company brass has good reason to believe that they can follow through on this promise. At the time of this statement back in January, the company was already up around 37% for the first quarter. So why discontinue a car that clearly still sells? Well, I would imagine that because it's built in China, it's no longer cost efficient to sell it here in America, what with all the tariffs on Chinese-built cars. The juice just doesn't seem worth the squeeze, especially when this isn't even your best market, you know? And it's a shame because you can make the argument that when this arrived in 2020, it was the first real direct alternative to the Tesla Model 3, occupying the same segment and aiming for the same consumer base. At the very least, with Volvo at the wheel, it was proof that a legacy automaker could plausibly build a viable EV brand, rather than just taking an existing model and electrifying it like Ford did with the Mustang. And really, I feel like the Polestar 2 was poised to succeed because it felt distinct. It felt unique, but it also felt familiar, which can make all the difference in getting people to adopt EVs into their daily lives. It still felt like a car rather than a software platform, you know what I mean? And sure, you could say it's a bad thing to feel like a Volvo, but I have a soft spot for Scandinavian automakers, although I've mostly given up on the possibility of ever driving a Koenigsegg. And maybe that's for the best, since I'm not a speed guy anyway. But while the Polestar 2 was a generally well-received car, arguably more so than the Model 3, it was also more expensive at launch while simultaneously commanding less consumer interest than its main competitor. Couple this with supply chain issues, battery costs, and the infrastructure problems that have plagued widespread adoption of EVs in the United States, and you can see how tariffs would have been the last straw. I think the electric vehicle space is arguably the most difficult space that automakers have ever tried to occupy because the market is constantly shifting. For every historical moment where EVs have gained a bit of momentum, it seems they've lost that momentum just as quickly, particularly over the past year, with demand for hybrids increasing beyond market expectations. Now, the EV future is coming whether the public wants it to or not, and that process means that some models are going to fall by the wayside. But I don't think the models that are discontinued represent the consequences of an EV meritocracy, so much as the manufacturing realities facing automakers. Rest in peace, American Polestar 2. Give my best to Saab. On the subject of hybrids, here's one with an interesting twist. BMW is planning to discontinue the XM, but it's being reported that a full discontinuation of the line might still be years away, with Automotive News citing an unnamed source that suggests production will end in November 2028. So why is it here? Well, that's because the base model XM won't be seeing 2026, as BMW's press release on the XM line states, quote, 3 become 2. The BMW XM portfolio is sharpening its focus, now offering just 2 models. The BMW XM label range topper is now the only model to come with an electrified V8 engine. The BMW XM50E, featuring an electrified 6-cylinder engine, remains available unchanged. End quote. Now, of course, BMW SUVs will continue. We'll probably get more electric BMW SUVs down the line, and with M badges to boot. But for the XM line, we're down to 2. And when you consider these launched with an MSRP in the ballpark of $160,000, and with competition in the market from the Porsche Cayenne GT and the Lamborghini Urus, the base model XM almost feels like it was designed to burn bright and fast, you know? Get people in the door and then upsell them trims like the Label Red variant, which stands as the single most powerful road-legal series production car in the history of BMW M, at least at the time it debuted for model year 2023. Because I'm not sure how much money BMW was really making on the XM since it was relatively low production for a plug-in hybrid crossover SUV. You would think a car like this would need volume to thrive, but then it never sold at a level to justify a higher volume anyway. As Auto Evolution noted back in March, while the X5 moved more than 72,000 units, and the X7 moved nearly 29,000 units, the XM topped out at just over 2,000 units for the measured period, which is admittedly an improvement of the roughly 1,900 units sold the year previous, but it marks close to a 15% drop from its inaugural model year. And so BMW started offering these on discount at a savings of up to $22,500 on remaining 2024 models, and $5,000 in conquest or loyalty cash. And what that suggests to me is that this car wasn't really long for this world, and in a way, I'm kind of surprised it's living on in any form, since it was among BMW's slowest sellers even when it was moving product. I never really thought of BMW as a bigger is better sort of brand, although I can see the virtue in hybridizing a V8 as it merges what the market seems to actually want with what their enthusiast drivers seem to appreciate. But just me personally, I don't love the styling because it falls into the same pug-nosed, angry emoticon styling that's been plaguing the auto industry for far too long. And it suggests that BMW has lost the plot on design, unless the point is to foster the idea of performance through aggression. Except this actually has the credentials. It doesn't need to look like this, right? I don't know, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. As for the BMW XM, whether this was a premature end for the base model or not, it does feel at times like this was meant to appeal to everyone within the BMW demographic, and as a consequence, it doesn't seem like it ended up appealing to many of them at all. It felt confused and unfocused, yet weirdly exciting at the same time because it was kind of a big swing, but it was a bigger miss. Yet it was also a necessary pulse check for a brand that's always treated itself like a shark. Gotta keep swimming, or else I'm gonna die. Rest in peace, XM. May you never be confused with satellite radio. And so, we end with the Subaru Legacy. One of those cars you never think of as being in danger of discontinuation. Because how often do you really think about it at all? But then that's just me. To millions of people, the Subaru Legacy truly meant something. And of every car on this list, it's the longest tenured. It's been in continuous production since 1989, specifically designed for the United States, and the very first Subaru manufactured in the US. The Legacy was instrumental to Subaru's success because it allowed them to plant a flag in the mid-size sedan segment and draw attention away from its competitors, and it arguably solidified the company as the utility brand. offering an affordable, practical sedan with optional all-wheel drive that would become standard in its second generation, with an aesthetic that was at least comparably as appealing as its competition like the Honda Accord and the Toyota Camry. And its lineage includes being the basis for the Subaru Outback, which was initially introduced as a trim level on the Legacy. And what I find interesting about this is that while the Outback didn't occupy the same market segment as the Legacy, the car that spun off from the Legacy ultimately went on to become more popular than the Legacy. It's sort of the automotive equivalent of Perfect Strangers and Family Matters, where the Legacy is that workman-like, zany opposites sitcom, and its spin-off became a cultural phenomenon that included the zany neighbor getting his own doll and cereal line. The Subaru Outback became the Urkel of the Subaru brand. It was everywhere. And it was versatile in the way a robot-building, DNA-altering nerd can sometimes be. Because of the Legacy, Subaru was able to extend their brand identity in the 90s beyond reliability and safety and into rugged utility and adaptability. You could argue that Subaru never becomes the Subaru we know now without the foundation that the Legacy provided. And while not every car with a lingering connection to the Legacy could be a hit, Subaru Baja, the Legacy still provided the starting point for some of Subaru's most unique vehicles, Subaru Baja, along with some of its most legendary configurations, as the 1989 introduction of the Legacy brought the EJ engine series along with it. This was the flagship for Subaru, the standard bearer for the brand. And even though it was ultimately outsold by the Outback, the Legacy still sold over 1.3 million units in the United States over its lifetime. And what's wild about this discontinuation, at least to me, is that according to the press release announcing its discontinuation, Legacy models sold in the United States are built in the United States, meaning the Legacy wouldn't be affected by tariffs to the same extent as other models, save for any parts required to make it here. In that sense, you'd think it would be among the more cost-efficient models for the company, yet Subaru cites the shift from passenger cars to SUVs and crossovers as the reason for the Legacy's end, along with the company transitioning to fully electric vehicles. And to their credit, it doesn't seem like Subaru is really milking this final model year to take advantage of the public, as the 2025 Subaru Legacy starts at a fairly modest $24,000, around there, making it among the more affordable new cars produced for 2025. And I don't know how that model's going to sell, but for whatever it's worth, I think it's virtually inarguable that the Legacy is leaving Subaru better than they found it. Rest in peace, Subaru Legacy. When you get up there to the great beyond, tell the AMC Eagle I said hi. Of course, many more cars than these have been discontinued this year, and we'll go through all of them in the In Memoriam montage in a few moments. But ultimately, 2025 was a strange year for the automotive industry, marked with disastrous business decisions, surprising legislation, and technological revolution, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But I think any singular year can be summed up by the cars that fail to survive it. Maybe some of these cars will return one day, or maybe they're just gone for good. But in a lot of cases, the auto industry was better for their existence, and consumers were richer for the variety and options they provided. Should these cars have been discontinued? And why do you think they were? Let me know in the comments, and chat me up. My screen name is Limited Time Roman. Like, comment, subscribe, tap the bell icon, share the video with somebody you think would enjoy it. All of that helps us out. And check out the annual RCR Christmas song for 2025, now available wherever you stream music. And if you'd like to support us in the biggest way, join us on Patreon for early and ad-free videos, along with exclusive content you won't see here. Thank you so much for granting me the privilege of another year of making videos for all of you, and sharing in the absurdity, the frustration, and the joys of the automotive industry. And now please enjoy this Automotive In Memoriam montage, highlighting the cars that will be staying behind in 2025. Have a good one, everyone. Safe travels and no travails. It's the end of us. You know I couldn't ever make it work now. I have to pick from choices where each one is getting worse. It's a small town. You know I'll never get to say goodbye. I'll just have to see you crossing Main Street with another guy. When I think of what I've done and how I let you go, I know now you're the one, but I lack the cash to let you know. I'd rather not be inside another one that isn't you. He's changing everything I love about the things you do. Every single day I hate to see another man in you. I ain't never gonna wanna see another man inside of you. Inside of you. Inside of you. It's a small town with not a lot of places left to go. A one-horse town, and everybody calls the one-horse Paco. You're one of a kind. They don't make them like you anymore. But he's worn out your transmission, putting foot to floor. When I think of what I've done and how I let you go, I know now you're the one, but I lack the cash to let you know. I'd rather not be inside another one that isn't you. He's changing everything I love about the things you do. Every single day I hate to see another man in you. I ain't ever gonna wanna see another man inside of you. Inside of you. Inside of you. Inside of you. The town is very small. I heard he let you stall, and now I'm the man who will have his satisfaction. He let you die, and I don't give a single damn why, 'cause I will have my vengeance. Wait and see, 'cause she meant everything to me. I'd rather not be inside another one that isn't you. He's changing everything I love about the things you do. Every single day I hate to see another man in you. I ain't never gonna wanna see another man inside of you. Inside of you. Inside of you. Inside of you. Did I mention that the town was very